In the heart of the galaxy, where the stars burn brighter and the void feels deeper, a signal echoed, one that was not meant for just anyone. It pulsed through space like a forgotten heartbeat, steady and patient, untouched by time. It was ancient, older than any known race and woven in a language no translator could comprehend. The United Galactic Council, an alliance of the most intelligent, powerful, and long-standing civilizations, gathered in a state of unease. They had seen messages, warnings, and relics before, but never something like this. Every empire sent its finest minds to decode it. Machine intelligences, neural clouds, memory singers, and mind-linked scholars all failed. Frustration grew. Some believed it was a mistake, others a trap. Months passed. Curiosity turned to concern, then to silence. But far from the center of power, on a small blue planet recently welcomed into galactic society, a team of Terrans picked up the signal too. Humanity, considered young and impulsive by their peers, was not even invited to the original council. Discussion. Their membership in the Galactic Union was symbolic at best, a nod to potential, not importance. Yet when Earth's linguists and codebreakers analyzed the signal, something happened. Patterns emerged where others saw noise. Within 48 hours, a team from New Caledonia Station cracked the first sequence. They didn't use ancient archives or quantum AI. They used something older, instinct, creativity, and trial and error born from a species that had taught itself to survive chaos. They discovered the signal wasn't just a distress call. It was a plea, a cry for help sent across time, not just space. And it wasn't directed to any empire or council. It was calling for someone, anyone, who could listen. The council was stunned. Representatives from mighty civilizations were left speechless as Earth's ambassador calmly laid out the decrypted message. The signal spoke of a fading star, a broken system, and an ancient enemy that once darkened the stars themselves. The words weren't entirely clear, but the urgency was. Whatever sent it had no hope left and was willing to bet its future on a stranger's mercy. Earth's presence at the emergency summit changed everything. For the first time in the Council's long history, all eyes turned to humanity, not with pity, but with curiosity. Who were these Terrans who could see meaning where others saw madness? Who were these people who answered a forgotten cry while the powerful hesitated? The signal had been out there for ages, and yet it was Earth that responded. Not because they were the strongest or the wisest, but because they cared enough to try. As debates flared and theories tangled in the air, one quiet truth echoed louder than any transmission. The galaxy had cried for help, and it was humanity that answered first. The decoded signal pointed to a place that no one wanted to visit, a dying star at the far edge of the galaxy, a place surrounded by the broken remains of civilizations that had fallen into silence long ago. Its name had been erased by time, and even the oldest star maps marked it only as a cautionary zone. The light from that region was dim, heavy, as if the darkness there had weight. When the Galactic Council reviewed the coordinates, the high response was immediate, too dangerous, not worth the risk. But for humanity, it was exactly the kind of mystery they couldn't ignore. Earth's representatives didn't hesitate. They offered to lead the mission themselves. While others argued about protocol, resources, and survival odds, the Terrans were already assembling a fleet. Their reasoning was simple. If someone out there was desperate enough to cry through time, then they deserved an answer. The humans didn't send their largest warships or most advanced AI. They sent people, engineers, scientists, explorers, all driven by a single question. What if we're the only ones who still care? The journey was long, pushing the limits of known hyperspace routes. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the space became. Navigation systems flickered. Sensors gave strange readings, sometimes showing ghost signals and long-dead radio waves. Ships from long-lost empires drifted silently near the star's gravity well, shattered, scorched, or melted into unrecognizable forms. It was a graveyard, yet oddly peaceful, like a battlefield that had been forgotten even by the ones who had fought there. When the fleet arrived, the star loomed before them, red, massive, and collapsing into itself in slow agony. Its outer shell cracked like old stone, spilling magnetic storms into the void. And within that storm, hidden behind waves of radiation and flares, something pulsed. At first, it looked like a metallic moon, caught in a strange orbit. But as the Terrans drew closer, they realized it was not a natural object. It was a machine, massive, ancient, and still active. No one could identify the materials it was made from. It had no recognizable language etched onto its surface, no readable power signature, and no clear point of origin. But it was alive. Not in the way a ship's AI is alive, or the way a synthetic brain operates, but in a deeper, more unsettling way. The crew reported hearing low hums inside their own ships, even when their systems were off. Dreams became strange. One engineer claimed to see flashes of star systems that no longer existed. Another swore she heard a voice whispering coordinates in her sleep. The humans didn't turn back. Instead, they moved closer. They launched probes, ran scans, and studied everything, even when the machine seemed to resist. Then something unexpected happened. The machine responded, not with words, but with a pulse of light that matched the pattern of the original distress call. It was not random. It was recognition. Humanity had not just found the source, they had woken it up. Back on Earth mission. Control watched in silence as the live feed streamed across billions of screens. The crew knew they were no longer just exploring. They were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. In the silence of space, at the doorstep of a dying star, humanity had reached out into the forgotten past, and something had reached back. Whatever this machine was, it had waited a long time for someone to come. The question now was simple and terrifying. Why had it called for help? And what had destroyed the ones who came before? The moment the ancient machine responded, the stars around the Terran fleet seemed to dim, as if space itself was holding its breath. Without warning, every screen aboard the human ships went black. Then, slowly, a vision unfolded. Not an image, but something deeper. It wasn't transmitted through sound or text, but through emotion, sensation, and memory. Every member of the crew experienced it differently, yet somehow they all saw the same story. It was not a dream. It was a memory, one not their own. They saw a galaxy once full of light, vibrant with civilizations that had risen far beyond anything modern species could imagine. Great empires moved entire planets with thought, and fleets of living ships sang through the stars. Peace had ruled for thousands of cycles. Then came the dark. A shadow, not of light, but of mind. It did not conquer, it consumed. It didn't destroy ships or burn worlds. It hollowed them. It fed on thought, on identity, on memory itself. The Yao, people who stood against it vanished not in death but in silence, forgotten, lost even by their own history. And at the center of this collapse stood a presence, formless, relentless, and eternal. The machine had been built as a warning, a message in a bottle sent across the sea of time. It had been programmed by the last survivors of a war that no one remembered, designed to sleep until the darkness stirred again. It waited, long after its makers were gone. It sent the call again and again. The Council's oldest members had missed it, or ignored it. Their records didn't even include the species that built it. But now, the machine knew it had been heard, not by the old empires, but by the newest voice in the galaxy: humanity. The vision faded, and the crew was left in silence. No sound, no answers, just the weight of knowledge they had no way to forget. Something ancient and terrible was returning, and somehow they had been chosen to face it. But the humans didn't ask why they were chosen. They didn't wait for others to step in. They met the memory of extinction with the same stubborn resolve that had carried them through their own dark ages. The commander of the fleet, Captain. Rana Elwood stood before her crew, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "We are not here by accident," she said. "This thing reached across time and found us, not because we're ready, but because we're willing." Her words echoed through the ships, spreading through channels to Earth and beyond. People listened, not just the scientists and soldiers, but civilians too. There was fear, yes, but more than that, there was a strange, rising sense of purpose. Humanity had always believed they were latecomers to a galaxy shaped by others. Now they saw the truth. They weren't late. They were right on time. The other species, the ones who had lived in peace for ages, had forgotten how to fight when it mattered most. But humans had never stopped fighting. Not just wars, but disease, disasters, and each other. They knew how to rebuild from ruins, how to protect what mattered, and how to stand even when the odds said to run. The ancient machine had not been built to find a superpower. It had been built to find a survivor. And that's exactly what it found. Humanity realized they weren't just explorers or messengers. They weren't just visitors to this forgotten star. They were the answer the galaxy didn't know it still needed. Whatever was coming, they would face it not as victims of fate, but as its challengers. The signal had finally been received, and the response was clear. Humanity heard it. And humanity would stand. Far from the dying star and the silent machine, the United Galactic Council gathered in their shining halls, suspended above the clouds of a peaceful world untouched by war for thousands of years. The chamber was filled with voices, not calm discussions, but panicked debates. The visions sent by the artifact had been shared across the Council's networks. Every species, from the crystalline minds of the Orcs to the elder wormkin of Velethis, had seen it. What they felt was not unity or resolve, but fear. The ancient darkness was real. It had returned once before, and now it threatened to rise again. Their solution was swift and cold. They proposed sealing the star system, erecting a containment field, and marking it as forbidden. Out of sight, out of mind. The oldest among them argued that the darkness could not reach them if they ignored it, that it was better to survive in silence than risk a fight they might not win. But not all agreed. From the far end of the council chamber, Earth's delegation stood, quiet but unshaken. When given the floor, Earth's ambassador, an unassuming man named Elias Ward, stepped forward. He was not the tallest, nor the most decorated. In the eyes of the others, he was young, inexperienced, even naive. Some chuckled before he even opened his mouth. But he didn't respond to insult with anger. He spoke with calm, clear conviction. He told them about Earth, not the science, not the ships, but the people. He spoke of how humanity had walked through fire again and again, ice ages that nearly wiped them out, plagues that crushed empires, wars that scorched the skies. And yet, every time they had survived, not because they hid, but because they stood back up. They had made mistakes, terrible ones, but they learned. They rebuilt. They endured. He reminded them that fear had never saved a world. It had only delayed its fall. The council chamber fell quiet. His words didn't carry threats, only truth. But truth was not what the council wanted. They voted, and the result was final. The star system would be sealed. No aid would be sent. No fleets would follow. Let the signal fall silent once more. Humanity was advised to stand down and return home, but humanity refused. Without raising their voices, without slamming fists, the Terran delegation quietly left the chamber. Their faces showed no anger, only purpose. Back aboard their ships, messages were sent, not for help, but for support. Volunteers poured in, from Earth, from Mars, from the deep colonies near Proxima. Even a few scattered voices from other species reached out, unsure but inspired. The Terran fleet did not wait. They returned to the edge of the galaxy, to the dying star and the forgotten machine, alone if they must. To them, it was not madness. It was duty. Because while others waited for safety, humanity chose to act. Not because they were fearless, but because they knew that some things were worth standing for, even if no one else would. In the dark corners of space, where silence had ruled for ages, human engines roared once again. They would not seal the truth behind walls. They would face it. They would challenge the ancient silence with every light they could carry. The council watched from afar, confident in their decision to step back. But deep inside, some began to wonder. What if the humans were right? What if hiding would not save them? And what if the only real hope now rested with the ones who had always stood up, even when standing was the hardest thing to do? As humanity returned to the edge of the galaxy, where stars flickered like dying embers, and the machine waited in silence, they did not come with fear in their hearts. They came with determination. Earth knew it was standing alone, but that didn't stop them. In orbit around the dying star, Terran engineers began transforming their fleet into something entirely new. Their ships, once designed for exploration or defense, became weapons forged not from tradition, but from invention. Human minds moved fast, adapting the data from the ancient machine, combining it with alien blueprints, and bending both into tools of survival. Plasma cores were rebuilt using alien frequency harmonics. Hulls were reinforced with materials salvaged from the ruins of long-dead empires. Shields were modified with pulses that mimicked the energy of the darkness they had seen in the vision. It was not elegant, but it was effective. They were not just preparing for battle. They were building a blade sharp enough to cut through fear itself. Back on Earth and throughout the colonies, the call spread, not just for soldiers, but for thinkers, builders, and believers. Universities turned into research hubs. Factories that once made farming drones now forged railguns. Civilians trained in survival and joined support crews. Artists painted hope across warships, and coders rewrote navigation systems while still in orbit. Everyone had a role, and no one was left behind. They weren't building an army, they were building a future that refused to fall quietly. Across the stars, other species watched. Some mocked the humans for their stubborn optimism. Others shook, their heads calling it foolish pride. But still, they watched. And in quiet corners of distant systems, something stirred. One day, a single scout ship appeared on the edge of the human fleet, small, bird-shaped, with golden wings folded like a whisper. It belonged to the Tiranari, a small avian species known more for their music than their military. Their government had declined to assist, but the pilot, young and alone, had made her own choice. She brought no weapons, only a message. You stood when no one else would. I choose to stand with you. The humans didn't ask for proof or paperwork. They welcomed her with open arms and gave her a place among them. Her ship was upgraded, her systems linked into the growing human network, and she became the first non-human member of what would become more than just a fleet. That day, they stopped being alone. That day, an alliance was born, not of treaties and signatures, but of choice. Others followed, not in fleets, but in quiet gestures. A technician from a neutral moon offered blueprints for energy dampeners. A medic from a peaceful world offered medical bots adapted for high radiation zones. Piece by piece, hope began to spread. The council said it was madness. The humans called it progress. Their ships, now fully converted, looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Sharp, fast, loud, and alive. Lights pulsed down their sides like breathing hearts. Cannons moved on thought-based targeting. Engines thrummed with a rhythm that echoed the signal that had started it all. Humanity had built their blade, And it was not just a weapon. It was a message. They were here. They were ready. And they would not stand down. The darkness would come. They knew that now. But this time, it would not meet silence or surrender. It would meet fire, will, and something it had never faced before. Unity. Born not from fear but from defiance. It began like a whisper across the edge of known space, a distortion in subspace, a flicker in the sensors, a cold presence that made even the most advanced computers hesitate for a fraction of a second. Humanity had been waiting, not with fear, but with steady readiness. Their fleet circled the dying star, standing guard near the ancient machine that had summoned them. And then, the darkness came. It wasn't a fleet of warships or machines with cannons. It was a swarm, a living storm made of thoughts and hunger, moving in unnatural silence, feeding on neural energy, seeking minds to consume and memories to erase. The first wave was silent and sudden. Ships closest to the edge vanished from scanners without a sound, their crews left in a coma-like state, eyes open but hollow. The swarm didn't just destroy, it drained, leaving vessels intact but empty, like abandoned shells. For a moment, even the Terran commanders froze. This was not war as they knew it. It was something older and colder. But hesitation didn't last. Humanity had trained for this, not for the exact form, but for the unknown. Orders flew across the command net. Ships shifted into formation. Signal beacons lit up. The Terrans didn't run. They moved forward. Captain Rana Elwood, now, the leader of the newly formed Alliance fleet, made a choice that shocked even her own people. She ordered her flagship, the Horizon Breaker, to become the center of a focused neural pulse, a beacon, loud and aggressive, designed to draw the swarm directly to them. It was a trap and a challenge. The humans were declaring themselves as the wall between the galaxy and oblivion. The enemy took the bait. The swarm surged toward them like a wave crashing against a lone island, but the island fought back. Human ships lit the void with weapons that hummed with borrowed alien technology and Terran instinct. Railguns spat molten metal with perfect timing. Drones buzzed in formation, releasing flares that disrupted the swarm's flow. Pulse turrets fired into the black mass, each blast carrying encoded data designed to confuse the enemy's strange hive mind. It wasn't enough to destroy. It was about buying time. Behind the Terran line, reinforcements scrambled to join. The Tiranari scout ship darted through the battlefield, feeding enemy positions back to command. A medical vessel from a peaceful world stayed just outside the range of danger, patching up escape pods and recovering stunned pilots. For every ship lost, another held the line longer. Humanity didn't fight with perfect weapons or unbreakable shields. They fought with coordination, courage, and sacrifice. Crews overloaded reactors to release bursts of light that scattered the swarm for seconds. Pilots flew suicide dives not to kill, but to save others. The swarm hit again and again, but still the line held. Back across the galaxy, feeds were live. Billions watched from safe worlds. They saw humanity bleed in real time. They saw fire, wreckage, and silence. But more than that, they saw resolve. Humanity didn't fight because they had to win. They fought because someone had to stand. And, slowly, that choice began to spread. In council halls once filled with fear, eyes turned to the screens in silence. For the first time, those who had mocked the Terrans began to wonder what kind of species would stand alone in front of the void. The answer was simple: a species that understood pain, loss, and the meaning of protecting something bigger than themselves. The black tide had arrived, and the galaxy had trembled. But humanity had met it, not as conquerors, but as defenders. They had shown not just strength, but something rarer, unshakable purpose. The line was bent, battered, and burning, but it did not break. The battlefield near the dying star still shimmered with the echoes of war. Broken ships floated like scars across the void, and trails of burnt light marked where the black tide had tried to consume all thought, all memory, all resistance. But for the first time in countless ages, the darkness was no longer spreading. It was retreating. The tide had turned. Led by the relentless courage of the humans, the newly formed alliance, no longer just a scattered group of volunteers, but a unified force, rallied behind a Terran admiral whose name was now spoken with quiet respect across dozens of worlds. Admiral Rana Elwood, once a captain with a mission no one believed in, now stood at the heart of a counteroffensive that would decide not just the fate of one system, but of the galaxy's future. Yet what truly changed the war was not the power of their weapons or the speed of their ships. It was the way humanity fought, not for conquest or pride, but for each other, and for those who had no voice left to speak. They shared everything they had learned: tactical data, swarm movement patterns, and, more importantly, hope. Humanity didn't just lead, they inspired. They taught species who had never seen war how to fly in formation, how to shield the weak, how to act even when afraid. They didn't speak in grand speeches or heroic promises. They simply stood up, again and again, until others started to believe they could too. And in that belief, something powerful awoke. The swarm, once unstoppable, began to falter. As more ships joined the alliance, the attacks became less coordinated. The darkness had never faced resistance like this. United, unpredictable, and unyielding. In the final battle, deep within the hollow remains of a system lost to time, the alliance struck at the heart of the swarm. It was not a glorious clash. It was brutal, chaotic, and costly. But it was also final. The last of the black tide, no longer a storm, but a fractured shadow, collapsed not in a scream, but in stillness. Those who survived felt something strange in that moment, not victory, but understanding. The enemy had not fallen in terror. It had fallen in awe of a species that had risen from nothing and chosen to stand, not just for themselves, but for all. When the battle ended, silence returned to the stars. But it was not the cold silence of fear. It was the quiet of peace finally earned. Ships drifted with lights still blinking. Survivors gathered on the decks, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, as if sensing it had fulfilled its final purpose, the ancient machine near the dying star pulsed once more. Its glow was soft, steady, and final. Across the Alliance fleet, sensors picked up the change. The signal was gone. Not because it failed, but because it had been received. The machine's core dimmed, and its long silence was replaced with something new, a resonance, deep and calm, like a voice whispering across time. Help came. Message answered. Humanity stood at the center of it all, not as rulers, but as reminders. They had not been chosen by fate. They had stepped forward when others stepped back, and in doing so, they became something more than newcomers to the galaxy. They became its defenders, its hope, its answer. Across the stars, the story spread, not just of a war won, but of a people who refused to let silence take another world. Worlds once afraid now looked to Earth not with pity, but with gratitude. And as the Alliance began to rebuild, it was with Terran values at its heart: resilience, unity, and the refusal to surrender, no matter the cost. The galaxy had cried for help, and against all odds, the answer came, not in the form of a mighty empire or an ancient power, but from the youngest voice among them, from Earth, from humanity.